Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
How would you like to become unstoppable, irresistible, and unafraid in every area of your life? Get free instant access to my Double Your Confidence program to become a person of action, overcome any obstacle, and scale any height. Go to kfmconfidence.com to get instant access to my program. Again, that's kfmconfidence.com. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Jerod Zavistoski. He is the host of the Modern Male radio show on LA Talk Radio and the author of Methodology of the Modern Male. Jerod, happy to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, Jerod. Yeah, I remember it wasn't too long ago. I was on your show up in LA. I remember I was like driving in. It took me like 5 hours to get from San Diego to LA just because all the traffic, and came running in like just before the show started at your place in LA. I had a blast there with you.
Yeah, you were one of the best guests. It was great having you. I think I got to have you and
it was a football
Ralph
player.
Brown.
Yeah, Ralph Brown. Yeah, one of the I think he played for the Saints. Had a good story there too. And so let's start off the show just to kind of dive into things here. We kickstarted off with like a favorite success quote or some sort of saying that the guest has lived by that's helped them on their journey. So share with us what you got.
I have a couple. My favorite quote is, "There's nothing with which every man is so afraid as seeing how enormously much he is capable of doing and becoming." And that's Soren Kierkegaard. And then the stuff I lived by, I had a mantra for a long time, and it had to do with drive and kind of accomplishing your goals. And there were I was kind of taught a very fear-based mindset when I was younger, and I was kind of taught to limit, what I felt was possible or what I thought could be achieved. And when the time came and I had to make really big leaps forward, fear can paralyze you. And one of the things that I always used to keep in the back of my head was, this is do or die. It's make or break right now. And I used to just always kind of say to myself, like, this isn't going to kill you. You're not going to die. So just do it. And that was a big thing for me for a long time.
Yeah. What would be an example when you had like a do or die type of scenario and you're like, it's not going to kill you, and you just went and did it?
I was a Muay Thai fighter, and I trained for a few months. And I'd been in martial arts since I was a kid, but Muay Thai, it really, really struck me. And I remember before my first fight, I got up there and I was like, screw this, I don't want to be here.
Yeah, right. The fear creeps in, yeah.
The fight right before mine ended early, so I had to speed up my warm-up. And then the guy in that fight came down and sat right next to me, and his nose was just shattered all over his face. And I'm 18 years old, and I'm free, and I'm sitting here and I'm like, I didn't think I was good enough, because I still had that mindset. I didn't think that I was like, man, I'm going to train him. And I didn't realize that I was way overtrained, and that I was actually like I blew through that fight like it was nothing. But and that's an example of how fear could keep you from even getting into a game that you could probably win with ease. And that mindset right there. So yeah, I went into that ring facing death. I was like, you're going to die. You're going to die. And afterwards, I had so much adrenaline. I didn't even remember the fight. I didn't even know who won.
Yeah, dude. That's a good point, though. You overtrained, you were ready for the situation, obviously, because you trained and you blew through it. You did well, but it's crazy how fear can make us feel like we aren't capable of doing something that we are well prepared to do.
Yeah, fear is absolutely the worst enemy anybody can ever have. That and limiting beliefs.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious to know what some of these limiting beliefs are, but let's take a step back. And how did you get started with what you do? You've written The Methodology of the Modern Male here. You're the host of the Male Talk Radio show on, on the LA Talk Radio show. You have a huge audience. What leads someone down the path and to do all this? Go ahead.
Man, it's weird. It's kind of like the butterfly effect. One thing happens in your life, it sets off a whole chain reaction, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, how did I end up here? And I'm going to answer both your questions kind of in the same sentence. I grew up, I had a really, really bad social skills. I came from a horrible background of domestic violence and crazy stuff with my family, and really, really challenging mental issues. I had bipolar as a kid, and it was very, very severe. And it got triggered very, very early for me because of my father, who was also very bipolar. And he, basically like destroyed our whole family. So, we moved out here to California, and I struggled a lot to be socially capable or competent. And I didn't do well in school at all. They just kept passing me because nobody wanted to deal with me. I mean, literally, like, I don't even think that I have a K through 12 education. I'm pretty sure that they continue to pass me because I was just such a handful. And, I kind of made my way through high school. And finally, I just dropped out. And there's a whole story behind that. But in a nutshell, I wanted to finish. I was talking to a teacher about finishing. I asked her to tutor me, and she refused. So I left. And I studied religion. I was trained to be a pastor for a while. And I also, trained to be a professional fighter shortly after that. It was a crazy turn of events. But one of the things that's always kind of stayed consistent with me is social dynamics, because it was something that was a natural atrophy for me. I wasn't naturally good with people, and I didn't understand social skills quite to the fine-tuned way that most people do. And that, led me to have a very, very introspective mindset with whatever I did. I was always kind of evaluating how I affected other people and how other people affected me and what my triggers were. So I was very, very introspective and self-aware. And I've had to be like that since I was a little kid. And for me, it was life or death. It was like, they're going to put you away if you don't stop, if you don't figure out what's going on with you and harness your emotions. So there was a point in time where I actually kind of like, I got it and I figured it all out, or not figured it all out. It was more about, like, I kind of expected other people or something to change, and nothing was changing. There were so many different factors that I kind of expected to help or do something for me, and it wasn't. And the pivotal moment was when I decided that I was going to take control of my life, and that the only person that was going to fix any of this was me. So
that's a big point right there. Just like, no one's coming to the rescue. That is like a law of personal development somewhere. Like, no one's coming to your rescue. You have to save yourself. And it's like, you could sit in the victim party for a long time, and you can live in that, or you can decide that enough is enough and that you're going to take some action. So what happens next year?
Once I decided to take control of my life, like I said, I was very religious, and I was counting on that to kind of fix me, and it didn't work. And I could go into that, but we don't have enough time for that. So I have a whole program on religious stuff. But when it comes down to it, I realized that nobody was going to save me. Nobody was going to help me. Nobody was going to do this but me. So I left that. I went into Muay Thai, and that provided such an amazing emotional release for me. Years and years and years of emotional damage and psychosis were just completely phased out in 1 year of kickboxing. It was just like, it was the most amazing thing that I'd ever done. And that to me became kind of a religion in place of that. And it grounded me. It really leveled me out. The ability to go as hard as you can, and not just like physically, not just like hitting, just to be able to push your mind as far and as hard as it can until it breaks. And I've done that before, where you just, I've been pushed so hard that I've broken. But, when you rebuild from that, it's amazing. You realize it's like going through the Marines or other training programs that guys go through that just takes them and puts them on this whole new level where they push themselves beyond any barrier that they could have possibly conceived of. And once I had done that, I think that that's where I kind of became a man. And the next big accomplishment, or the next big hurdle, was kind of like women. Here I was, I'm 18, I have a six pack, I'm reasonably good looking, and I'm a kickboxer. I thought that would be the winning package, and it turns out I was just I was just terrible with women. Oh God, I can't tell you how many times I just biffed it in front of the girl I liked, and I was awkward and antisocial, and I thought, like a lot of men, I think that women are very, men kind of do what men would want. So men will be very visual, and they'll go and buff up in the gym, and they'll peacock a little bit, or they'll kind of propose ideologies that, or situational ideologies that they would want. So they would walk up and be like, "Hey, you want to go hook up?" or something like that. And to women, that's like, that's like saying, "Hey, you want to pour acid on your face?" Like, they're just so turned off by that. So I had to learn, these things, and that's really where the journey started.
Yeah. So you're saying you had to learn how to connect with women.
Yeah.
Like, you had to connect. Like, no. So you bring up another good point here, talking about how, like, you're looking good, and you are a good looking guy. You're in great shape, and you're this strong, kind of mentally tough, this fighter. And yeah, it's a good package. It's like, as men, we try and build ourselves up into this package and then just put it in front of the woman as if they'll just start flocking. But skipping the whole idea of like an actual connection, an actual meaningful, fun conversation that can lead to some sort of relationship, whether dating or just friends or into a relationship. But there seems to be I feel like a lot of guys are trying to build themselves up into a package rather than just try and build a connection with a woman.
Yeah, to some extent, I think that that's true. But the other thing is, I think that men have a lot of misconceptions. There are so many things that are just misunderstood. And when it comes right down to it, you can build yourself up into a package. I've advised guys to do that. And there is a method to doing that, and how you kind of like put the present in front of her and unwrap it for her. But I think that what the fundamental thing that guys are actually getting wrong is that they're building the wrong kind of package. They don't know how to build themselves into a package that a girl would want. They think they know. And that's half the problem. It's just the misconception that because they think they know, that that's okay. It's so stupid. So many guys end up kind of believing these half-truths and all of these misconceptions, these social constructs, that they don't even know where they got them from. Like, that's the craziest thing. Like, nobody knows where these things came from. They're just like, oh, well, through the course of their socialization, they just became this, like, this hodgepodge of like wrong stuff. And that's what I do, is I try and go through and correct that and kind of show them that, like, oh, when a girl said this to you, like way back in your development, and you took it this way, and you did all of this building upon something that you took the wrong way, here's what you should have done, and here's what she really meant, kind of a thing.
What's an example of some of the things that are wrong in the package? Like, what are they doing wrong? Because I understand, yeah, you can develop your personality, you can develop your income, you can develop who you are as a man. Like, these are good attributes that'll help you build up your health. Yeah. But like, what are some of the negative things, or things that really aren't helping men get the goal that they want?
Well, like, okay, so the classic one is when girls say out they want a nice guy. Every girl says, they want a nice guy, they want a sensitive guy. So men start to act feminine, and it's such a turnoff to women. But they go, well, you said you wanted a nice guy. So he becomes less masculine and more feminine, thinking that that's the way to be nice. And then his niceness is dependent on her approval. He starts to do things basically to win her approval. And nobody likes that. Nobody likes somebody that's eager. I mean, like, even that dynamic, the whole eager and approval dynamic, that works in paternal settings. That's like, how a son and a father would interact, or a mother and her daughter, or a father and his daughter. It's not something that women really respond to, especially in the opposite way. Now, don't get me wrong, like, there is that whole daddy issue thing where some women are actually really attracted to trying to win men's approval. But when it's flipped around and it's men trying to win women's approval, it's just so bad. It doesn't work. And it's one of the single biggest mistakes that guys make, is they go, oh, well, I did this. Like, will you be proud of me? Like, I'm a nice guy. And they keep trying to prove it to her. They keep trying to present themselves like they were applying for a job. And it's like, no, you can't.
Right. Yeah. And the nice guy is like repellent to these women. It's like you're spraying repellent in her face.
Yeah. But I mean, here's the thing. You can be kind and you can be masculine in the same sentence. And like, to be masculine is to be a man who's constantly shedding unnecessary things, but your actions can be kind. The difference between a masculine male and a nice guy is a nice guy does things contingent upon the approval or the compliment afterward. He wants something from her. Whereas, the masculine male will just walk up and do it.
Because he already has it. Like, he's not looking for validation from the girl because he's already validated himself.
Exactly. Exactly.
Nice guy's a big one. That's a huge one. Like, what are some other ones? But I think that's the big one though.
The opposite of that is the macho guy.
Right.
So a girl says something like, "You're so macho," or guys will be listening to a podcast like this and they'll hear all the bad stuff about nice guys and they'll go, "Okay, well, fuck that," and they become more macho, more closed-minded, more kind of, fuck that about everything. And that mindset is kind of born out of frustration. So these guys, they'll go up and they'll try and get with a girl and she'll turn them down and he'll be like, "Okay, well, fuck her then," and then he'll go and do it again and again and again and again. But pretty soon that attitude, that screw it, I hate this, whatever, it actually starts to stick and it becomes a developmental quality. And then they start getting girls and they're like, whoa, maybe this fucking attitude is, it's born out of frustration. Maybe this is the way to go. And what ends up happening is they turn on the attraction switches in women, but then women end up with them and they're like, these guys are fucking assholes. Like, what's going on? Like, why is he treating me like crap? And what she doesn't know and what he doesn't realize is that he built this attitude, this fucking attitude. He built this and it's kind of an all-encompassing to him now. It's a blanket statement for everything in his life. Fuck it doesn't matter, da da da. And it's like, no. You can take what makes that kind of attitude attractive to women and you can separate it from being a completely tactless, belligerent asshole and kind of throwing that out in every facet of your life. So that's another big one.
Yeah. It's like too far on the right. It's like, if I'm not going to be nice, I'm going to be this jerk. I'm going to be this asshole. And it actually does yield some results for some women, and I feel like in the short term, but in the long term, it's like a destructive pattern. It's destructive in relationships.
Certainly, yeah.
And so, what would be like the right package here?
Well, so the attractive quality, what Methodology of the Modern Male is, the book that I wrote, is I took a lot of things like this, and the book is set up almost in blog format. So I take a subject like the macho guy or the nice guy, and I kind of talk about it in kind of the same way that I'm talking to you right now. It's just like, okay, here's where you messed up. This is what it really means. This is where, and what Methodology of the Modern Male does is it separates like the initial, like, for example, the macho example. What is attractive about that is that the guy has now convinced himself that he doesn't need anybody to validate him. So he's got that kind of certainty. I don't care. He's got that shedding of that makes the masculine attractive. But what he is also doing is hindering his own growth because he's constantly putting down anything new or productive or proactive that comes into his life. So you can have the same kind of, I don't need your validation mindset. I don't need anybody's validation. And also think, oh, wow, that's nice. Like, I appreciate that you validated me. And I will take into consideration anything that you've said to, that may or may not be an issue for me or a problem in my life. And by the way, I'm always self-evaluating. So I'm always growing. And if there's anything that you feel that I could fix, please, as an outside perspective, I'd really enjoy hearing that. I think that's the balance.
Yeah, and that's just right there. That's like true masculine power is what I'll call it. When you're putting yourself out there almost in a vulnerable way where you're just like, hey, if you see something, like, I'm open to that as well. And it's like a collaborative experience. It's not just I know everything experience. Like, it's all me. I've got it. I don't need your help. Or I'm getting hurt if you're, offering value to me. You're open. And I think that openness is a big part of that masculine power.
Well, and you kind of nailed it there by saying vulnerable, because a lot of people confuse weakness with vulnerability. And it's the exact opposite. Being vulnerable actually makes you stronger. Being able to take constructive criticism is one of the most important things that I think, one of the most beneficial things that you can ever do for yourself or for anyone. And learning how to evaluate that constructive criticism to where it doesn't implode you or destroy you or whatever, it doesn't make you go home and cry about it. But it's really productive to feel uncomfortable, because all growth grows from that moment when you feel uncomfortable with something and you want to change. Pain produces results. There's no pain, no gain. It's age old, but it's true. People change, people move forward because there's something that they don't like. There's something in their situation that they don't like. And that's how you grow as a person. It's not easy to self-evaluate and look at the qualities that you don't like and go, oh shit, that exists. That's in me. It's so much easier to be like, well, screw it. Whatever. I'm just like this and this is just me. It's like, And there's a balance there, because guys that are, incredible nice guys will end up just consistently self-evaluating, but they're kind of self-evaluating based on somebody else's standard. So they'll evaluate themselves and they'll be like, well, do you think I need to change this, or do I need to change this? Or, like a puppy kind of always running around looking for a directive order. Whereas the masculine man evaluates himself based on standards that he's acquired, standards that he's put up. And he kind of sits down, evaluates himself and breaks it down and makes his choices based on him. Not every piece of not every piece of feedback, whether it's constructive or deconstructive, is something that you should immediately change. But it is something that you should weigh out and evaluate. And that evaluation process, I think, is what creates the true masculine, or the true alpha male, I should say.
Yeah. So it's like he's open, but it's like he'll consider it.
Yeah.
It's not like you say it and it's the law and shit, I need to like do therapy now because this guy said this thing. It's consider it and evaluate it based on what your own values as a man, and being able to come up with your own conclusions rather than let someone else give you those conclusions.
And we see that actually repeated a lot in entertainment. When you look at the heroes or the archetypes of the hero, there's action movies that always have the stoic alpha male that doesn't say anything and kind of just runs through and combats everything. But when you look at like the really good stories like Braveheart or even Vikings, and you look at Gladiator, when you look at those characters and kind of how they are and who they are, you start to understand what a real alpha male is and what the truest, to be the truest form of masculine that you could possibly be.
Yeah. When you talk about these action movies where the guy's like, just got it all together, like I kind of think of like James Bond. Like he really can do no wrong. Like he doesn't really like.
Yeah, that is the epitome. Or Chuck Norris. That's like the complete opposite. That's like the American James Bond.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you look at these guys like you talk about Braveheart or Gladiator. I mean, these are like war movies, but just it's so many other movies as well where the guy there's this emotional side to the man where they both actually lose their wives in the movie, and
it's okay to be in touch with that.
It's like you get to see him hurt.
Yeah.
And you get to see him grow from that hurt rather than just everything works out my way and because I'm a badass. Okay.
And that's the appropriate way to feel in the masculine. I mean, men are affected. We are emotional creatures. We express our emotions differently, but to think that men are completely unemotional and to try and make men completely unemotional is kind of a silly thing. And, in terms of my book and what I do, you can be sensitive and emotional. Like I've actually coached guys that are like way more emotional than I would have ever thought. And, they're happily married and it's crazy. It's okay, but you have to have that balance. There still has to be that edge, that masculine sex appeal.
Right. It's like you can be, sometimes you could even lean a little bit towards that nice guy, but I feel like men want to know that you can also tap into that stronger side if necessary for, like, I feel like men just want to gravitate towards men who they can trust. And for women as well. And women, there's also that protector type of feeling. But like if there's a sense that like you won't stand up, like I don't think this guy would stand up for himself, or this guy would just get walked over, then you start leaning more into that nice guy realm where people don't want to be around someone who they can't trust or they don't feel safe with. I feel like if we go back and look at like tribal and all kinds of, like we go back thousands of years ago, it's like we want to be with someone who we feel that would help us survive or add value into our lives.
Yeah.
Not who we need to protect like a puppy when they're a grown ass adult.
Absolutely. And I mean, there are so many different things that because society has changed so quickly, I think that we're actually evolving as a species, not just societarily, but like kind of biologically. I think it is rubbing off on us. So the less masculine male is actually like, the whole kind of dork nerd culture, which is, it's a culture I respect. I think it's great. But you see a lot where we're seeing a lot of entertainment kind of reflect that these guys, they're being made the centerpieces of movies and stuff. They're kind of being made the heroes and they're really awkward and they're kind of pussies.
Like Jonah Hill or like Michael Cera, these kind of guys.
Yeah. And I know girls, like I've actually spoken to women about this and I'll be like, who's your crush? And she'll be like, Michael Cera. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, how? And she'll just be like, oh my God. So It's funny because nerdy's becoming hot, and women aren't necessarily looking for, some women in some sub pockets aren't looking for necessarily the masculine male. In those instances, in those little sub pockets of people, I actually wouldn't do very well with some of the girls. It's like, honestly, the less testosterone you have, the better. So it's really, really interesting to kind of watch society evolve.
Yeah. You bring up a good point. It's like, I remember video games 10 years ago where it was, you were a nerd if you're playing video games. But today it's like, it's accepted. It's like normal. Like everyone has an Xbox. Like everyone has something. It's normal to do those things. It's a way of life. But like now it does make it, I feel like it's just harder and harder to be a stronger masculine man. But you talked about that girl who she likes that. And I think for men, they might, that's when you know you are a nice guy, is if you change to make that woman like you. Yeah. If you were to, I'm not saying you did, but like, if you're like, oh, this girl likes that, like tell me who to be and I'll be that person.
Yeah.
If that's the mentality, like, who do I need to be? Who do I need to be? What do I need to wear? What do I need to say? What do I need to drive? How much do I need to make? If that's the attitude someone's running through in life, then you'll be in for a big world of hurt.
Certainly. And, it's really fascinating. Because you touched on some interesting points there. And it's really complex dynamic because a lot of what I teach is advice from women. So like my radio show, for instance, 90% of the shows we have really, really beautiful social media influencers on, basically the girls that
Instagram models. You're talking about Instagram models. Just say social media influencer, Instagram model, okay, who takes booty shots.
Yes, Instagram models
with protein powder.
Yeah, some of those. We've had real models on, actresses, but basically beautiful women in general. And what the purpose of the show is to basically try and see what women want or like, and then communicate that to men in a way that they can understand. Because you're right, a lot of men will fall into a trap where they start becoming a robot and they start just kind of doing whatever she says. Do this, do that. And then she feels like she can walk all over you. So the important part is finding a way to truthfully and honestly center yourself and evaluate all of the feedback that comes into your life through the standards that you've produced, and then evaluating those standards and whether or not they're legitimate, necessary, or unnecessary. You have to have a filtration process. And I know that one of the hardest things that I did was because I had all of these different ideologies that I'd collected over time, and I had no idea where I formulated them. And then I started to realize that I was completely misinformed. So I started asking girls what they liked. And then I fell into the trap where all of a sudden I was doing whatever anybody wanted me to do. But then you realize that then you're becoming a doormat. So I've been through and personally experienced anyone could, or at least what I think. I mean, I'm a dating coach. I haven't found a problem I couldn't fix yet, but I've experienced all this stuff. I think that that's really, really rare for a guy or a dating coach or whatever. I think a lot of guys that get into this industry are just, they were just T-Rexes from the start, and they might have hit some hiccups, but for the most part, they were always kind of like been that driven guy. And I mean, I've always had drive, but I've always, and that's the most fundamental thing, but that drive is what kind of pushed me to figure out and become and grow, because I didn't have a male role model growing up. I didn't have anybody to kind of look up to, and I wasn't satisfied with anybody I found around me. So I had to kind of make up my own version of what a man should be, and I did that basing my opinions off kind of what women were saying, what I felt was attractive, and then my own sociology, and then which things I felt were necessary and which things I felt weren't necessary. I mean, it was a really complex problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and that could be challenging if someone is because if you talk to 20 or if you talk to 50 girls, you're going to get a lot of mixed and varied answers from the same question.
Yeah.
And it's like, damn, well, what do I she said this, she said this. It's like, what the hell? What do I do? It could be confusing, but just really crafting your own. And like you said, you create your own and base it off of what works and what other male role models are out there and what you feel is that strong masculine male role model for yourself, because there's a woman out there for every type of guy. At the end of the day,
definitely
you don't have to fit one mold that's a one size fits all for every woman, or even for other men. If you're looking to build your social network and stuff, it's the key is really be unapologetically you, build yourself up to a place where it's you love you, of course. If you're eating Cheetos on the couch all day, I mean, there probably is a girl for that, but it might not be, the girl that you aspire to be with for the rest of your life. So
it's hard because there are two really strong philosophies when it comes to that. And, there's one that says be unapologetically you. And there's the other that says, grow, develop. There's all these different things that you can change.
Yeah, go ahead. It's a big point right there. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of guys get confused. They get stuck and they go, and this was a huge one for me. It was like people were going, just be yourself, be yourself, be yourself. And I mean, at the time, there were things that I look back now and I'm like, man, had I done that or had I tried that, I wouldn't have recovered from that today. I'm really glad that I had the foresight to go, oh, don't do that. So I can totally see where there's this huge cloud of confusion over how far you should develop yourself and, whose standards do you develop yourself to? So, I try and it's been a really complicated process and, it's something that I study every day. But when it comes down to it, I try and communicate that through my book a lot. And I try and find the constants when it comes to the women that we interview. Women are different. There is a different kind of woman for every kind of guy. But there are some constants. There are some things that all women find universally attractive. And the other really complex problem is that the things that women find attractive or unattractive can vary based on their own sociology. And that sociology may or may not be their best developmental self. So you end up with a girl who's like, oh, I'm really into out of shape guys, but it's really because she's insecure because she doesn't want to worry about losing a guy or whatever. And it makes her feel secure. And she might be okay with guys with bad hygiene because it reminds her of something or, a friend or a family member or whatever it is, or some, past trauma that she went through. And you find that women have a lot of women have suffered a lot of emotional damage and they grow up and they socialize and they have no idea that it's there. So all of a sudden they become attracted to qualities in men that might damage them or that might set them lower, that might hinder their growth. So it's such a complex issue. And this is my life's work. This is what I've dedicated my entire life to, is figuring out how to help humanity through this. There's sociological problems and there are mental problems. Their limiting beliefs, their lack of drive, their, all of these different ideologies, trying to kind of find the truth in the noise.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big point when you talk about like, hey, like, I think we've all been told, even by like your aunt at some point, like, hey, just be yourself. Like, and you're like, that doesn't work. That got me where I am today. Yeah. But like, I'll share this. It's like, I believe if I throw this out, like I believe we always have to grow, like no matter where we're at in life, even if we're successful financially, whatever, we're every aspect of our lives, like we should always be growing. Like I feel like that's a law of nature. Like you plant a seed, the tree just grows. Like it doesn't stop growing because
Tony Robbins 101.
Yeah. You said Tony Robbins 101? Yeah. Everything grows until it dies. And I feel like the more that you grow, the more that you are going to come alive. Like growth, I find is correlated with life. Like when you're growing, it doesn't matter what age you are too. Someone could be like in their 70s listening to this, 60s, 80s, whatever. It's like you find a new passion or hobby and you just start getting into it. Like you start coming alive. Like you really start, really, life is amazing. You're like, why did I know this earlier?
You see the physical proof of that. When you sit for too long, your muscles atrophy, they tighten up.
Right.
When you're in a hospital bed for too long, they atrophy, they die.
Right. Yeah. People who retire often, and they retire with no plans. Like they just retire, like, oh, damn, I'm retired. And there's often like death associated soon after. Not like immediately retire and you just die, but their life expectancy is decreased when someone doesn't have something that they're doing, something that's challenging them.
Yeah, certainly. And I've heard, the opposite of that. And I've heard of couples lasting until they're 100 because both of them kept their jobs and just kept working long after retirement, kept their minds busy.
Yeah. I recently just interviewed a woman who is 94 years old she started writing when she was 80 and she just launched her 5th book. She's 94. And honestly, she was like more sharp than like most people I know. like she was super sharp and on point and she's full of like real wisdom. It was awesome. The episode coming out should be out by now, by the time you guys hear this. But coming back to this point of like, hey, like, well, I don't really like myself. And then it's like, well, grow. It's like, but I'm supposed to be myself. I think there's a lot of conflict and resistance there. And also with like Eastern philosophy where it's like, just be at peace with where you are, kind of like accept, where you're at in life.
Yeah, that's a really hard one.
That one challenges the idea of like, hey, you got to grow. But I'll insert this, and it's also in the intro of this podcast where it's like I believe it is. It's like love the life you have while you create the life of your dreams. So it's like you love where you love yourself, like today, like not tomorrow. You love yourself today for who you are, like where you're at, but you're excited and passionate also about the future.
I think the key is loving the process of learning and growing. And I can relate this to Muay Thai. Like when I first started doing it, I wasn't that good. And then as you go through it, you get better and better and better. And every day you wake up sore, feeling, like your body's all banged up. But it's good. You feel it and you start to love that growth. You become addicted to it. And it's hard to say that, because some people don't have a lot of drive and they're all about going with the flow and just kind of doing that. And and then other people have so much drive that it's like, they got enough drive for you and 5 people around you. So they're always just driving forward. And neither one is wrong. I think that the world just needs all kinds of people. And I don't think that I think that there are people who are designed to kind of fit a different methodology or a different way of being. The world needs its hammers. The world needs its nails. And I'm not saying that people that go with the flow are nails, but the world needs all kinds of different things to kind of make it work and ebb and flow. So it's really just about what works for you. And I think that when it comes to development or developing yourself, and you go, oh, well, being me got me here, like I suck, da-da-da. It's not necessarily, be yourself, but find the purpose in you, find the passion in you, find the thing that drives you. And as you're driving to make that better, I think that when you love something, it'll force a development in a lot of different areas of your life, whether you like it or not. I know for me, it was love for a woman that actually made me kind of refine a lot of areas of my life and produce a lot of different things, qualities and traits that I didn't know I had or that I didn't even know I could ingrain. Because I loved something so much, I was willing to do anything to get it. And, that worked. So when it comes down to it, be you, but it's like, if you're a talker, don't try and be silent. If you are the type of person that just loves something that everyone around you kind of disapproves of, fuck them. Do it anyway. But when it comes to you exhibiting a quality that other people find incredibly distasteful, like for instance, I've had a really interesting time with my vocabulary because I swear a lot, and I never really cared. It's something that never hindered me. I never really cared, and the way in which I do it, I don't think is incredibly offensive. However, that kept me from getting a really, really big motivational speaking job at the infancy of my career. 3 years ago when I first kind of started doing all this, I had a really, really big opportunity, and she goes, I can't have you on my stage because you swear too much. So that was something that I had to kind of evaluate and go, should I change this or shouldn't I change it? Is this something that is affecting other people? Nobody's ever brought it to my attention that, only in terms of media has it ever been brought to my attention. Nobody, obviously like when I get around kids, people are like, but then again, I also feel like I've got something to say about it. When it comes right down to it, I love the word fuck. I think it's a great word. It's such an amazingly universal word. Who's to say that that's bad? The word doesn't convey the intention behind it. The intention conveys through the word. So when it comes down to it, it's like, if you meant something negatively, but you said a nice phrase on top of it, it doesn't make it any less negative when it comes to evaluating how you speak. So, and then I was, really, really kind of debating on whether or not I should take it out of my vocabulary. And then I watched a Gary Vaynerchuk video.
Yeah. He cusses all, and Tony Robbins, like you have to actually go to his events. But like, I mean, I saw Tony and I was so surprised. Like every other word was almost F this or F that. And Gary Vaynerchuk, I've seen him speak maybe 3 or 4 times now. And like, he will drop more F-bombs. I think it was like within one sentence, he dropped 5 or 6 F-bombs. It was like, how does that happen?
So what I kind of came to the conclusion of is that it's something that I'm not going to let go of, but it's something that I need to be able to control. Uh-huh. And that lesson for me is a lesson for kind of everybody that's listening to this, is you don't ever want to have a part of your personality or something that you're completely without control of. you couldn't change or fix if you wanted to. And then from there, you can evaluate as to whether or not you should fix it. My entire book is literally just all of the different stuff that guys can do to make themselves more attractive to women, all these little psychological notes and things that guys have gotten wrong. But in the beginning of the book, I go right out and say, I'm like, if you disagree with any of this stuff, or it doesn't work for you, or there's something that you feel is different for you, I'm like, the point of this book is literally just to get you thinking and evaluating things that you've done before or things that you haven't done before. And I want you to kind of adopt that mindset. And if you do, then my job is done. You're good. You're golden.
Because they're starting to think for themselves and realize like, hey, no, this is what I like. Because we don't know, the guy might be reading it in a conservative town in the South and like might not work. Like his culture, his upbringing's different, and he's got to be his own man for who he wants to be.
I think a lot of men aren't introspective, first of all, and that I think it's propagated because every time a man becomes introspective, he gets labeled as insecure, and then that becomes attractive. So men are kind of like, there's this attitude that's reinforced in men to be macho and be more closed-minded and know everything, and they don't know everything, so and men aren't kind of naturally like, I'm really curious about all this self-development stuff. It really kind of takes pain, like blunt force trauma, to actually get a guy to get up and go do something with his life. So, when it comes right down to it, self-awareness is huge. And then once a guy becomes self-aware and he goes, and self-awareness isn't the same thing as being self-deprecating. It isn't the same thing as being insecure. Just being aware of oneself is self-awareness. But once these guys become self-aware, then there's this vast world of shit just out on the internet. And there's so many different people spouting off all this motivational stuff. And it's like, it's regurgitated from somebody who's never done it before.
Right.
And that killed me, dude. Like when I started getting into this industry, the biggest problem I had was that people were teaching other people. These are people, human beings that have finally got the bravery to stand up and ask for help. And somebody's teaching them that doesn't know what they're talking about. That's never done it before. They've never done it themselves. And that pissed me off. So I made a vow that I would only ever teach people stuff that I knew firsthand, that I've experienced, and that I've cross-checked to make sure that it wasn't just my narrow experience, to make sure that these were universal laws, that I could find in at least 50 different people that they all agreed on this. So that's...
What are some examples of that? Like, was this like in business, or like, was this in like personal development?
First of all, so when I wanted to become a motivational speaker, I said, you're not going to get on stage right now and start motivating people. Yes, you overcame a lot in your life, but you've never made it. At that point in time, I was like 24, 25. I hadn't made it. So I said, what do you got to do? You got to build a business. You got to succeed first. So I actually created Modern Male because it all kind of fell into place. I was trying to figure out how to become a motivational speaker. And I met this older gentleman outside my house in Hollywood, and he was in his mid-50s, and he was an admitted virgin. And he was like, "Oh, how does a guy get to be like you?" And I was like, I could kind of sense his like backhanded. He thought I was entitled and privileged.
Yeah.
And I started laughing, and I was like, "Yeah, and I started to break down the structure for him, and he ended up like kind of visiting me every single night. He ended up coming back again and again and again. And this weird crowd started to form. I lived in Hollywood, by the way, so it was like there were always kind of people out and about. So it wasn't like this weird crowd just kind of started forming in the middle of the suburbs.
Right.
But I gathered a crowd, and then people were going back and forth on all these different authors that they had heard of, and I was like, or had I read this, had I read that, and I was like, I hadn't read anything on anyone at that time, and a friend of mine approached me and he goes, "Hey, do you know who Neil Strauss is?" Or he goes, I think he walked up and he goes, "Are you a pickup artist?" Or he said, "I didn't know you were a pickup artist." And I said, "I'm not. I don't know what that is." And I had never even heard of this concept of pickup artistry or dating coach. I didn't think that was a thing. And he's like, "You've never heard of Neil Strauss? You've never read The Game? You've never read the 48 Laws of Power?" And I was like, "No." And he goes, "How the fuck do you know what you know?" And I said, "Dude, it's just, I really wanted to get better with women. So I put myself out there, and this is what I learned." And he was like, "You do realize that you're on par with some of the best dating coaches like in the world right now?" And I was like, No, I didn't even believe him. So I went home and I bought the game and I bought all these books. And I'd kind of been starting an outline because at that time, people were commenting that I was like good with women and they were kind of like, oh, it must be nice to be so good looking. And I was like, screw you. Like, I didn't get any of this because I was good looking. And nobody believed me. So I had like a chip on my shoulder. I had something to prove. So I wrote out this outline and I was going to print it out and actually physically assault. I was going to bitch slap the next person that told me that I was just good with girls because I was good looking. Because I've always been good looking. And there was definitely a time in my life where I completely tanked with women. So I had this outline and I kind of went through the pickup artist stuff and I was like looking and there were some similarities, but I think the major thing was that a lot of early pickup kind of came from a very misogynistic place. And it came from this woman hating, we're going to get back at these girls who didn't love us and didn't like us kind of place. And don't get me wrong, I think that it's a lot of pickup artists have evolved out of that. And I was funny, I was on your website kind of going over some of the tips that Neil Strauss put down. And I was like, man, people are changing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's becoming bigger and more growth based.
Most of those guys like don't really exist anymore. Most of those guys don't exist. Like it's kind of like a new generation of guys who started with that kind of stuff and then really like it's more combined with like personal development and just being a stronger man. But some of those guys, like, they're long gone. Like that whole industry was a small group of guys. It grew across the world pretty much online, but I don't know one of those guys that's still going. And if he is still going, he has significantly changed.
Well, it's funny because I belong to a lot of the pickup forums just to see what guys are talking about and see what they need and it's still big. It's still big. It's still strong. And it's sad because it's so chauvinistic and horrible towards women. It's just, sometimes I can't even look at some of the stuff these guys post. And so there is that element. And I thought that was the only element. So when I got into writing my book, I was raised by a female. I've grown up around females. So I was never, misogynistic or chauvinistic in my opinions towards women. If anything, I was too much of a nice guy and I idolized women, or not idolized, but I put women at too high a value and I was constantly trying to win their approval. So if anything, I had more of a nice guy approach. But then I created Modern Male and it was figuring out how to balance masculine with the nice guy. So what I teach people is it's kind of like nice guy game. I teach guys how to be that super edgy, masculine, charming, amazing human being, that guy that they want to be without compromising their morals. And I think that there's a bigger desire for that now than there is for guys that want to just the secret ingredient to mind fucking women. I don't even think that that's very popular. And another big factor is that a lot of those guys that had all that hatred, we evolved as a society. And now, like we were talking about, nerd culture is actually pretty cool. And there are lots of girls. Like you can actually find girls in nerd culture. I had this girl on my show recently who looked just like Jessica Alba. She's so cute, and she's on this Team Unicorn thing, and they do all of these really like nerdy Star Wars videos and stuff. And they're just, nerd culture has grown so much that it's like, I don't think that guys are as angry anymore because I think that things are becoming more available to them in their own sociology. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So they can attract women in their own space. Like they don't have to necessarily become like some like football star. Like you could actually just play video games and still do quite well. But it's still about being that like stronger man. But you can still do what you want to do. Like you don't have to transform into whatever like social script is written about how to be a man.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I would go to Comic-Con. I could totally like dress up and do cosplay and stuff. But I think where methodology of the modern male really goes is that I want men to feel like they can experience and be anything, anyone, go anywhere, do anything. And I absolutely detest when people limit themselves by genre. And they go, well, I'm interested in Star Wars, so I have to hang out in these nerd groups. And it's like, no, you can be the cool guy and the nerd guy and whatever else you want to be. And it's like, I'll go and hang out with guys that are doing like, they're having code wars and they're sitting there coding stuff all night. And that's fun for me because I'm learning. I get to experience, all of their really funny innuendos and stuff. And then I can also go out to, a huge event where you have to be dressed to the nines in a suit and tie and you have to play politics and all that stuff. And I love that too. So it's just making guys realize that being closed off and narrow-minded is limiting you to so many good things in this world. And men, especially with fashion, men tend to dress a certain way. They get comfortable that certain way and they just stick with it. And it's like, I have a very, very vast wardrobe. It's very colorful. I have articles of clothing for any event, any type, anything. And I want men to feel like they can do that, like they can embrace whatever. And when I was writing this book, there was this, and there still is a lot of this homophobia towards fashion. So men kind of limit themselves in how they dress by fear of its association with being gay. So they limit themselves incredibly. And then it doesn't help that the second they start dressing nicer or better, women ask them like, "Oh, are you gay?" Because it's become such a standard that like straight men cannot dress well unless you're from Europe or something. But, in America, it's like if you're straight, you dress like crap. And that's just become accepted by society. And then you go to places like Europe, you go, you travel to, like I went to Milano and it was like, the guys over there that are completely heterosexual are dressed like, some of the queens over here. You go to West Hollywood on drag night and you're like, oh, wow. And you'll see guys, in Italy just suit, but they don't care. And they're getting girls. So it's really, really interesting when you break it all down and trying to really assess what is the most aesthetically pleasing. So when I started dressing differently, I had to go out and I had to ask women what they felt, what they thought. And they'd be like, "Oh, are you gay?" And I'd be like, "No." And they're like, "Well, why are you dressed like that?" And then you kind of have to negotiate as to what is truly more aesthetically pleasing to them. The idea that if you could balance both masculinity and fashion sense, is that something that would be more appealing to women? And the answer is yes. It is most commonly appealing to women.
Really good stuff here, diving into all these different aspects here.
I don't know how long you had, so
we got some time. Let's go into the knowledge round. Just gonna ask you a few more questions here, dive a little bit deeper into your brain here. So are you ready for the knowledge round, Jerod?
Yeah, sure, I guess.
After 200 plus interviews, I've identified the most common trait of success as confidence. Whether you're trying to achieve financial freedom or improving your relationships, confidence is what separates those who get what they want in life and those who don't get what they want in life. So before a man sets out on his journey, it's important that he has the confidence in himself to accomplish his goals and his dreams. You have to have this area of your life taken care of in order to create the life that you want. That's why I've created a free program to double your confidence in less than 30 minutes with this weird but simple set of exercises. Go to kfmconfidence.com. Again, that's kfmconfidence.com to transform your life. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. First question I have for you, Jerod. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling really lost and unsure about their purpose? What I get from you is like you're on purpose. You're like, boom, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. Like I'm going to be doing this for the next 20, 30 years. Like you have found something and you're on it and it makes you come alive. Like what advice would you give to someone who does not have that and is still searching?
For finding a purpose, it's do what you can't help but do. It's a mantra I live by. It's very, very important. I struggled with this because I was good at a lot of things and I could see my future in these things, like, especially kickboxing. I could see myself becoming a prolific fighter. But then I started to think about it and I was like, man, that it has elements. It has some elements of things that I love, but there are some elements that I just really don't love. And I kept letting things go and shooting for better. Constantly saying, well, yeah, I could see my life. Like, I'd be a world champion. I'd open the gym. And then what? I wanted more for myself. But there were elements that I loved from that. So this is a really, really interesting concept, and it's something that I struggled with for a long time. And I finally came to the conclusion that you have to do what it is you can't help but do. When the opportunity to do this thing presents itself, you're already there. You're already doing it, whether you like it or not. it's more than passion. It's more than drive. It's more than love. It is what you do. It's what you were designed for. I started to break this down. I had an example for this. It was like if you took a clock, right, and you smashed that clock and pieces of it just flew everywhere, and you were trying to put that clock back together, and you had these little gears, right? And let's say some of these gears are interchangeable. And let's say one gear fits in this spot, and it's like you kind of got to jam it in there though. And there's another gear that fits in this spot, and it's a little easier. And you go down the line until you get the one that fits perfectly. So it'd be like that one thing that you could do, like a lot of guys get into sales. And for me, sales was something that, I was interested in. I was a talker, so I thought sales. And I realized that it would have been kind of like jamming that gear into place because sales wasn't really what I wanted to do. That gear would have always been grinding metal on metal, and it would have worn me down. And I think a lot of people end up in career choices that are very close. Well, I mean, some people end up just jamming that gear in there and it don't even fit. But some people end up with a gear that is close or closest to the thing that they were supposed to do. And it fulfills them in most ways. But over the course of time, it does slowly grind them down. And that's where you see people when they get older, they've got all these kind of complaints. They're kind of over it in life. They didn't do what was truly fulfilling to them. And I was watching all this stuff happen. I'm seeing all this stuff happen. I'm listening to all this motivational stuff. And I'm going, what is it that you can't help but do? Like what is it? What's your purpose? And I didn't realize that I'd answered the question. Anytime somebody was around me that needed help, it was an uncontrollable need to help them. I've just never been able to shut that off. I can't stop it if I tried, and it would make me miserable if anytime I try and hold it back. I had an incredible knack for motivating people, for changing people's lives because of the vast array of experiences I went through in my life. And I used to think it was a bad thing because I'd done so much, but I really didn't have a lot to show for it besides the experience of it. I studied to be a pastor. I was a fighter. I've done this. I've done that. I've conquered a lot of things, but on paper, I wasn't super impressive. So I really started to evaluate, what are you going to do with your life, man? Like, you keep doing these things, you kind of see where it's going to go, and you dive out. And I'm like, why am I given that? And it wasn't just diving out. A lot of times I'd burn out. I couldn't figure out why. And I realized it was like when my time in that particular thing or facet or interest, when my time there was up, I would immediately get sick of it. And I would just be compelled, almost forced out of it. Like, I can't stand this anymore. And I would completely change. And I used to hate that quality. I used to hate it so much because it felt like I could never follow through with anything. But then I realized that my purpose was to teach people, was to help people, was to relate to people. And I only ever needed to be in something long enough to where I could see where the mastery would come in. And then I could leave. But I had to understand it to that extent. So it's really interesting for me. I get to learn about really fascinating things, subject matter, kind of go off on these tangents and come back, synthesize the information and give it back to people. And like my book on dating is one book. I have other books that I'm going to be putting out on. The next one's going to be on how to win your ex-girlfriend back. And I found a lot of success in helping guys win their exes back, win their wives back, and fix their relationship problems. And then I've got another one on bipolar. I've got another one on success and motivation and, getting over the stuff that's going to trip you up in life. And then I've got another one on the mind. And I've just been sitting here collecting all of this information and synthesizing it and creating this. And then it was launch, And it's all been this big plan, which is Innovative Awareness, my company.
So do the thing that you can't help yourself do. Do the thing that you have to do.
And when you're not succeeding, it's okay. Being an entrepreneur is not easy. And when you start out, you're going to get a little bit of that beginner's luck, and then you're going to get kicked in the nuts. And you're going to keep getting kicked in the nuts. And it's going to happen again and again and again and over and over and over. And when you're doing what you know is your purpose, what you know is something that's going to sustain you forever. When you're doing something that no matter how hard you get hit, you're going to keep getting back up. You just can't help it. It's such an amazing feeling to know that you're going the right way. It's just a hit. And I think when people are attached to things that aren't right, that, when they're going in directions that aren't right for them and they get hit, they think about giving up, or they do give up and they end up turning it out of this or out of that. But when you find that thing that you love, or that thing that you can't help but do, you're stuck there. You're stuck with it for life. There's no, that this is your path. This is the path that you're going down. And there's something to be said for that certainty. It feels really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I can get that from you. And in so much, like, just the energy of your voice and what you're doing here. What would you say now, Jerod, are two or three of your most influential books, and why?
Wayne Dyer was huge for me. All of his stuff. I have everything. I listen to his audiobooks. He's great. It's funny because Tony Robbins was actually the opposite of inspirational to me in the beginning. There's a really funny story behind that. I don't think we have time, but there was a time when I was so ignorant, closed-minded that, or not, I wouldn't say ignorant. I didn't know. Yeah, so ignorant. I had no idea what a motivational speaker was. I didn't know that these guys existed. And somebody told me I was going to be the next Tony Robbins, like a psychic said it to me. And I thought psychics were quacks. And, just the idea of that was so stupid to me. And I actually went to go see the psychic to mess with him. I didn't go to see him because I thought he was going to be right. I went to go fuck with him. And he ended up flipping everything on my head. And he was like, so accurate. It was scary. And then he goes, "Yeah, you're going to be the next Tony Robbins." And I said, "Oh, that's great. Who's that?" And he goes, "You never heard of Tony Robbins?" And I was like, "No." And he goes, "How have you never heard of Tony Robbins?" And I'm like, "I'm sheltered, dude. I don't know." So I ended up buying this guy's stuff. And in the meantime, like, he was like, "You're going to be a motivational speaker." And I was like, "What is that?" And, I just kind of, I at that time, I felt so good about it that I just started helping people any way I could, any way I could think of, and kind of teaching them how to overcome their obstacles and hurdles in their life. And I get Tony Robbins' program, and I realized that I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's right. And like, I just knew all this stuff. And I realized that it was the same stuff that I was already teaching people. And it just killed me. It crippled me. All of a sudden, I thought that because somebody else had done it, I couldn't do it. And I didn't want to get into this industry because I didn't want to be a copycat. Even if I said to the whole world, I'm like, I created the same program as Tony Robbins at, 20, nobody would believe me. So that actually hindered me for a long, long time, thinking that there was only one. And that was one of the biggest limiting beliefs that I really had to overcome, was believing that, there are different voices in this world. There are tons of people doing this, and every single one of them is great. And every single one of them, and that's something that I would impress for anybody who's listening to this right now. We live in the age of innovation right now. So everybody's trying to come up with these new original concepts, and they're all innovating off each other. And that's awesome. But don't ever be intimidated by an industry, because there are already good people in that industry, man. Jump in, get in there. And, don't be afraid to take an ass whooping. Like, that's how you learn. That's how you grow. So, and then another really influential book was actually The Power by Rhonda Byrne. That was the first book on anything remotely motivational that I'd ever read. I got a DVD of The Secret like everybody else, and I got the audiobook of The Power, and that was what opened my eyes. That's what kind of started this whole process, and I saw it starting to work. And then when it didn't work, where it didn't work, were the places that forced me to start looking at everything differently. And then, just to put it out there, Les Brown, I've never read any of his books, but his audio seminars are amazing. And those are probably, he's my favorite motivational speaker of all time.
Yeah, really powerful books and classic guys. I mean, you can't get past the classics. It's unfortunate that Wayne did pass away, I think, last year or so. But his book, Erroneous Zones or whatever, I think is like one of the highest selling books of all time, with like 40 or something million copies sold. So a really good book to check out for those interested in diving deeper into Wayne Dyer. But that's all the time we have here. So Jerod, how can the audience follow up with you moving forward?
You can find me at modernmaleinc.com. All of the radio shows are on there. They're available. They're free. My book, we're just releasing a new edited, published, so that'll be happening here shortly. And then look for seeing me in the news. Like I said, I got a new publicist, so we're making big moves here. And I have a deal going through right now with a few television production companies. We'll see. I can't really mention them by name right now, but I think I can. So I'm looking at talking to Torio TV right now, They're a startup and they do interviews and stuff, but we're looking to start pushing the modern male content out through video series and funny things and kind of make it like a BuzzFeed. So look out for that on torio.tv. And yeah, you can get my book. You can get any of the stuff you can find anything on modernmaleinc.com. You can find me on Instagram at modern.mail. You can find me on Twitter at Male Methodology. And you can find me on Facebook at Modern Male.
All right, Jerod, thank you so much for sharing your story and your lessons here with my community. It's been a pleasure having you here on the show.
Dude, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and millions of downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we're just getting started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a helpful review in iTunes because it really helps the podcast grow so we can impact even more men in the world who need this. Guys, this is all about living with purpose, where every day you only do things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. And always remember, love the life you have while creating the life of your dreams. Go to kfmfree.com to get a surprise bonus I've made for my listeners. Again, that's kfmfree.com for something that's changed my life, and I'm offering it to you for free. Also, check out my Amazon best-selling books that I've written for you to help you crush life at kfmauthor.com. Again, that's kfmauthor.com to see all the books I've created to help you break through in life. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, founder of knowledgeformen.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.